Basketball, football, baseball. From Division I to Division III, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Don Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
Better than mine. I got a packed house yelling, bring them out, bring them out. I'm a hot girl selling, bring them out, bring them out. All the dope boys selling, bring them out, bring them out. Fuck the backstage yelling, bring them out, bring them out. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Welcome in. It's College Sports Weekly. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. We're powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don't forget, you can join in on the conversation on the Nicolay Law text line at 414-677-1250. You can drop a note on the social media feeds if you so desire. Don Macholis, along with the Professor Dan Underberg. Aaron Morris sitting in. The hardest working man here at the station joins us this morning. Aaron, good to have you back. Good to see you.
I think that title is reserved for Sparky, but I will take it.
He's not here.
He's not here.
So
that's
yeah,
true.
don't worry about it.
if he was the hardest working man, he'd be here
this weekend.
Thank you.
He's he's in the Dells this weekend.
And Charlie's got the day off. Congratulations to Charlie and his family. His sister's getting married today. Good gosh, she's getting married today.
Okay.
Thank you. So congratulations to them. And speaking of an important day, my friend over there has got a little anniversary going on today. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. 33 years. My bride, Jill. So thank you very much.
And the statue for Jill is already being built.
Oh,
33 years
it's
with you, Hoss.
statue.
Come on now.
Bronzed right in front of the house. Yeah.
Right next to Giannis. It's going up right next to Giannis down at Fiserv. So as we make our way through today, we'll talk about the Badgers. Again, 15 days now until we get to kickoff.
Mm-hmm.
15 days. It's starting to feel real. Next week, we get to talk about some games that will be played on Saturday and Sunday because it'll be week 0, which again, to me is the stupidest thing in the world that we have something called week 0, but at least out of week 0, we get something substantial to watch and talk about. So again, 15 days until it's Wisconsin and Notre Dame at Lambeau Field on a Sunday at 6:00. I equate it to a Packer-Bear, a Packer-Viking game. I think that area for that game on a Sunday, Labor Day weekend, is just going to be electric.
Oh, it's going to be beautiful. Yeah,
it's going to be awesome.
Watching that sun set a little bit and watch the lights kind of glow on a little brighter and brighter. Yeah, it's going to be great.
A little bit later, guess what? We get to talk about the law and
we
the
never
NCAA
do that on this show.
and college sports. So we're back at that again. I think Charlie would be really happy in this case that the NCAA at least won one of the items that have been thrown at the court system here in the last few months. But we'll get into that. We'll talk about some headlines. Next hour, we get to talk about the AP preseason top 25. Why? Why not? Everybody else does, so I figured we should as well. And really the validity of it and everything that goes along with the AP preseason top 25 we'll get to in a moment in the second hour. I shouldn't say in a moment. And then we'll talk as we normally do. We're going to check in with our friends at Bryan and Stratton, but today's a little bit, I'll call it special, as the head baseball coach at Northern Illinois, Matt Majcrzak, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, is going to join us. Used to coach at Bryan and Stratton, now coaching Division I baseball down at Northern Illinois. So it'll be good to check in with Coach and get that perspective of what it's like to go from a JUCO to a Division I program and everything in between. But let's start with the Wisconsin Badgers. Dan, we got a chance to see, that being the public, the Badgers on Tuesday night as they opened practice, a bit delayed as Mother Nature rolled the storms through on Tuesday night, not only here in southeastern Wisconsin, but in the Madison area as well. So things got delayed. The football team was able to go into the Kellner Family Center, get some work in while us stood in the entranceways waiting to be allowed into the bowl because of the lightning. But about 7:40, the Badgers took the field, and we got to see them go through a practice for about an hour and a half, hour, 20 minutes, whatever it boiled down to. And as I was telling you before we walked into the studio, I think at this point, what we know is that we don't know, right? Because we read articles that say, hey, the Badgers, we threw these games into our glorious computer, and we went through this a few weeks ago with the percentages, and theoretically, by analytics, the Badgers have the potential to win 8 games. Then a week later, someone writes, this could be a very, very desolate year for the Wisconsin Badgers, and the doom and gloom cloud flies overhead. But I'll tell you, being in the stadium and watching that team go through practice, I think they got a little bit of juice because they were in the stadium with some people watching. The vibe, I will still stand by it as I drink the Kool-Aid for this upcoming season. I'm on pitcher number 2. But
with the straw,
the vibe is just different again. It is so much different than what we saw the last 2 years that it's got me drinking the Kool-Aid on pitcher number 2, and I'm still okay with it. Again, I don't think what happens at Lambeau dictates how I'm going to feel about the season. I go back weeks 2 and 3. That will be the indicator for me as how this Badger season's going to go.
Okay. When I look at this, it's good that they got the practice in. I'm with you. I think I've been kind of beating the drum about we don't know what we don't know, because I have been all over the board, on air, off air, about what this team is going to be. We've seen everything from this team is going to finish with 3 wins to this team is going to finish with 8. And I've been kind of cut in the middle, 6-6, 7-5, and not feeling really good about any of those predictions, because you just don't know. When I look at this team and I look at Notre Dame, that particular game, what the question's going to come up, guys, in the next 2 weeks. What do you want to see? Right? When you watch this game for the first time, what do you want to see? And I guess for now, what I want to see is our shiny new quarterback with our new quarterback smell, and see what he can actually do against, the number 4, number 5 team in the nation, and do that. Because prior to that, Colton Joseph has gone against Troy and Louisiana Monroe and things like that. So as much as I want him to be successful, and from what we see in practices, it looks like he can do that. He's never gone against this level of competition, especially right out of the gate on a historic field or something like that. Now, maybe he raises it, he brings it up to the next level, and he does fantastic. We'll see. But I want to see what this quarterback can do, because these prognostications are really all based on quarterback, followed by, in my mind, offensive line. Those 2 areas. We feel fairly good about the defense, but the defense can only last so long. We've seen that the last 2 years.
So, Aaron, to piggyback off the professor there, what is it you want to see week 1 against Notre Dame? The professor, talked about the quarterback play and the offensive line. What about you?
Yeah, I'm looking for some sort of a pass rush. I just think the Badgers, whenever they have been good in the last 2 decades, it's been because they've had edge rushers that can create some havoc on the defensive side of the ball and just disrupt a little bit of momentum. I'm not going in expecting an upset. I mean, Notre Dame, right? We've seen, and we'll talk about AP poll, number 4 in the country. So probably a little steep to expect an upset, but just disrupt some rhythm. Don't let them just go down the field and be Notre Dame and have no issues on offense. I need to see the defense get a little bit of pressure.
Well, that's just a good segue, Aaron. That's why he's a pro. He's just a pro over there. As Mike Tressel met the media yesterday and had some things to say in the midst of the media scrum, the first thing we'll hear from Coach is talking about now with that defense, the emphasis on turnovers.
So obviously creating turnovers was an area of emphasis for us. And I think I mentioned before, in the spring, our emphasis was opportunity awareness. Like, we have to recognize those times when the ball carrier doesn't see us and punch at the ball. When we got to fall camp, we said, okay, there's no more participation medals. We're doing a great job recognizing those situations and having the opportunity awareness. Now we have to get it out. And you can just see the intent and intensity rise. And then once one person does it, it snowballs. That's momentum, and that's real. And yes, we do tally it. Yes, it is a competition, and yes, we're creating more turnovers than we did last year for sure.
And we know that that's going to be an integral part of this team, is to get the ball out of the hands of whatever offense they're up against and giving the Badger offense more opportunities to try to put some points on the board. I think too many times in the last few years, though, the defense, I think, really was the shining hood ornament of the program last year. The idea, again, of not having them on the field as much is not only beneficial, obviously, for the offense, as we just said, but it keeps the defense fresh as well and gives them an opportunity to get rested and be out there when needed to get the turnovers and make the plays necessary to help this team get some wins this year.
Yeah, if Wisconsin's going to have any success, I agree with you guys that it's going to start with the defense, because last year they weren't bad. Last year they were able to do that, and what we saw was even through the end of the season, we saw the defense create opportunities that the offense couldn't reciprocate, right? And it was they got some wins near the end, but it was still, it was kind of still rough to watch sometimes. It wasn't clean football. Who cares? They won. But now the way this team grows is to maintain its defense, but the offense has got to be able to stick it into the end zone more often. I know it's kind of a Doug comment, but they weren't doing it last year. They weren't doing it last year.
I don't think it's a Doug comment at all, because when you even look at the Green Bay Packers on the professional side of things, as a Packer fan, how frustrating is it to watch that team constantly get inside the 30, inside the 25 last season I'm talking about, and settle for field goals. So yeah, I think getting the ball in the end zone is incredibly important, especially the way special teams have gone in this state. Not just the Badgers, not just the Packers, in this state. Special teams, it's like once you come into the state and cross the border, somehow special teams just gets erased from the skill sets of those athletes.
Let's check at the border. Yeah,
that we bring in, and it's just been a rough go. Now, Coach was asked, that being Mike Tressel, during his press scrum yesterday, how do you evaluate a pass rush when you can't hit the quarterback and you want that disruption, as Aaron was saying before, on defense? If you can get to the quarterback, it does so many other things. Here's Mike Tressel talking about that.
Sometimes it's hard for you to tell because we can't hit the quarterback. Sometimes it's hard for me to tell because you can't hit the quarterback, because it is ultimately about finish, right? It's about finish. I'm really optimistic and really excited about the disruption some guys are causing. I'm really excited about the guys understanding exactly what their lane is, meaning they understand their strengths. And if they're power guys, they're using power moves. Sometimes power guys want to be, dancers. And then if they're speed guys, they're using speed as their primary move. So I think we're impacting the quarterback greatly. And game times, we're going to know about the finish.
And the idea of finishing isn't always a sack. Sometimes it's just making a quarterback run for their life and taking them out of their reads, or forcing them to commit a bad throw, whatever the case may be, as you make your way down the chart of things that you can do to a quarterback. So yeah, right now in practice, you can't finish. And I understand that. I don't know how, I'll be honest with you, watching even the practice on Tuesday night, how some of these guys have the ability to pull up. Like, there were moments where Colton Joseph drops back to pass, edge rusher gets around, and I mean, his clock could have been clean, but these guys know they're I'll call them pros at it. They know when to pull up, tap them on the head, tap them on the shoulder, like, I'm here, kind of a deal. But the frustration they must feel of getting around that corner and you've got a clear shot, but then also realizing I need that guy on the other side of the ball, so to speak, to have a great year for us to be successful, and the ability then to pull up.
Well, and what I take from that interview there is just the energy that's come from Tressel. He really believes what he's saying. This is not a coach in this case, and we've heard it from other coaches throughout, I'd say the last 3 months. They're not spinning anything right now. They're not trying to kind of build into the future. You listen to Tressel talk about his defensive line. He feels that he's there, which is great. Now the trick for any football team is to keep them healthy, and be able to do that. But if they can get that push from the front four, that's fantastic. And they like, again, disruption is going to be key because, like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sack.
Right.
It just gets into the quarterback's brain, get into his space, and see what you can do to get a 3 and out as quickly as possible and just move on to your offense again. It's for me, it's just really interesting the way, from last year to this year, how the personality and the energy of the coaches have been.
Mhm.
We saw that in the Big Ten meetings. We saw that where it's just been different. It really has been. They're not hedging their comments. They're not kind of backing it up with a little bit of an excuse, just subtlety in the background. Now they're really this is a coaching staff that I think is excited to see this football team play. And that's great, but I'll go back to, again, what we don't know about the offense being able to score points. We don't know a lot about our wide receivers. Okay, we know they're athletes, but we don't know a ton there. We don't know a ton about our running backs. Okay, we know, Dylan was there last year. He's back this year, but now he's your number 2. And how much has that offensive line improved? My goodness, we need them to improve. Right?
Absolutely.
And so we see a lot of great news about a tight end. Fantastic. But, again, it's during practice. So there's a lot about this team, particularly on the offensive side, that we're hoping is going to work out.
Aaron, Mike Tressel, this will be number 3, talked about the indicators that he looks at in order to know whether or not this defense is ready. And I think, again, to Dan's point, what you hear in his remarks, you don't get spin. And that's one of the pleasantries, I think, that we've had so far during this offseason, as we haven't had necessarily coach speak. It's been a little more in the forefront. And maybe it's because these coaches, my goodness, this
You're doing
coaching
well today.
staff understands their backs against the wall. Anyway, here's Mike Tressel.
Yeah, I think how well they communicate with each other, listen to each other, how loudly they do that. I think volume is an indication of confidence. So they do this well enough, and the trust and belief is high enough that if we put in any defense that I don't hear volume out there, I say, okay, that's a little too much. I got them a little confused, because I know when they are 100 miles per hour, knowing exactly what to do, they communicate like crazy. So those are the indicators. I think a loud defense is an indication of a confident defense, which is when you play fast. And we all can notice if you give up a play and everybody gets silent out there and their body language gets in their own head and things like that. And I do not feel like we've been doing that.
Okay. My point on this, I agree with everything he's saying. I believe everything he's saying. Can you imagine how quiet it must have been on the offensive side of the ball? If loud and tone is confidence.
But
what was that like a year ago and 2 years ago on the offensive side?
But I would wonder then, it's different. Two sides of the ball being completely different.
I hear what you're saying, and I understand that. But I mean, when you think about offensive football for the Wisconsin Badgers, and it truly was offensive, what did you see the confidence in that team on the offensive side? There was no juice.
I think you could argue on both sides of the ball until last year, you didn't see confidence whatsoever. And I love the fact that Coach talks in his comments there about knowing that when I hear the noise, I know they're pulling their ears back and they're playing football. They understand their assignments. When it's quiet, I got an issue. So I either need to reteach it or I just need to scrap it, like forget about it. I think we saw a lot of that under Phil Longo.
Right. This is where I'm going.
Where it was a complicated system to run with a group of players that did not fit. It was a square peg in a round hole that both athletically and schematically everything was off center. They were thinking too much while they're out there. And what you hope for now is on both sides of the ball, that we'll call it the noise, as Coach described it, that they have it, that they can the defense can pull their ears back, as they love to say, that the offense, when Colton Joseph gets in the huddle and barks out whatever the play is, boom, we're off and running, that we're not walking to the line going, okay, what do I do? How do I do this? While he's, getting everybody into formation, and you have your offensive linemen, your running backs, your wide receivers all going through within their brain about, okay, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, instead of just reacting. And when teams can just react, that's when they're at their best, right? I think everybody understands that, who, regardless of the sport. I mean, it could be basketball, baseball, it doesn't make a difference. When you're just confident about what you're doing, your athleticism is what takes over. It was not part of any of the sound bites that we had. He talked about the fact that he's looking for, obviously, one, consistency, and he constantly tells his players, I need you to be good every day, not great at moments, and then nothing else after that, if that makes sense. Because in his mind, good will still give you great at various points throughout, let's say, a game. But what I can't have is mediocre play, one great play, back to mediocre play. It's that level of consistency that I think we're trying to get from this Badger team. And hopefully then, if we get that level of consistency, the Kool-Aid I've been chugging will be worth the consumption.
Okay. Well, enjoy your Kool-Aid.
I'm going to.
I mean, yeah, enjoy it now. It's all good.
Okay. And I get the skepticism, because you and I have sat through many games and looked at each other like, what's happening out here? What is going on? I completely get it. But the beauty of a new season is optimism. There are Cleveland Brown fans right now who are excited about the Cleveland Browns.
So you're associating yourself with Cleveland Brown fans?
Listen, I'm counteracting your pessimism over there on the other side. The man's got an anniversary today, and the glass is half full. You would think the glass would be half full with the red Kool-Aid. Go ahead, Aaron.
I would just say that I think a big thing that we all know, but we don't generally talk about, or it never gets brought up, I think, when talking about the lack of success for this team over the last handful of years with Luke Fickell, is that, I don't know, he hasn't had a starting quarterback play hardly ever. They've all been hurt every year.
I agree.
I would say if those guys are healthy all year long, they probably aren't as bad as they are. They probably make bowl games. So it's not like I don't necessarily totally blame Luke Fickell for having 3 or 4 win seasons, 5 win seasons, and looking as bad as it is. If he has his quarterback in the offense, who the offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, he has his quarterback, they probably win a couple more games, and we're not as doom and gloom about this team right now.
There's a degree to what you just said that I would absolutely nod my head to. But for me, it's the Phil Longo component of what that offense was trying to do. And I think, Dan, you brought it up last week, 2 weeks ago. We were talking about a Conference USA offense in the Big Ten. It doesn't work. We've seen coordinators step in that they're going to reframe what a culture is for a specific team. And unless you're Ohio State, who just gets, 5-star athletes and everybody else in a transfer portal, it doesn't work. So you need to play, in essence, Wisconsin football. Iowa, offensively, is about as boring as it comes in the college game, but they win. They understand what their culture is. This is what we do, and we win football games.
Yeah, and look, if Wisconsin could return to kind of an Iowa status. Look, I remember when Dane punt, or Dane, maybe a pass, Dane. Okay. That was kind of that culture of known at Wisconsin football for quite some time. And it was boring football, but man, it worked, and we were happy Badger fans. They were winning. Right?
It was running back you forever.
Absolutely.
Offensive line, running back you. If you wanted to make a name for yourself to go to the NFL, you went to Wisconsin, amongst a few other schools, as an offensive lineman. If you wanted to, because of that offensive line, make a name for yourself as a running back to go to the league, you went to Wisconsin. That's just what we did. It was what the culture was. We got away from it. And now I think we're in the midst of trying to pull the boat back into the dock. All right, let's get to a break. On the other side of the break, we're back to the courtroom, Daniel, because we had a couple of legal cases that took place this week that will affect college athletics here in its immediacy. Dan, Aaron, we'll all talk about it. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios. This is College Sports Weekly, and we're powered by the Potawatomi Sports I had to wait till after that little bass line. That's the best part of the intro to Law and Order. It seems appropriate for how much time we spend talking about the NCAA, college athletics, and the court system. I needed that voice guy. You know, there are two entities, and however they do, it's what's on the field and what happens in the courtroom. Welcome back in College Sports Weekly. We are live from the Potawatomi Sports Book Indoor Studios. How's that?
All right, that works.
Different. All right, well, Sparky will be calling in a minute that I read it wrong. However, as we get rolling here, and in this segment, talk about a few court cases that made the news here. One in the last 24 hours, one that really piggybacked off of something that we talked about last week. Every once in a while, we come up with a topic. I shouldn't say come up with it, but talk about a topic, and then all of a sudden it makes news the following week afterwards, and I'm like, oh, someone's listening. That's all right. I'll take it. We'll take full credit for it. Even though it has nothing to do with us, but we'll still take full credit for it. One of them, however, as far as the court cases go, was a decision that came down yesterday, a 2-1 decision, 10th Court of Appeals, putting a stay on that 5th year of eligibility that a Denver court had granted all of those players that were seeking that 5th year of eligibility, where the cutoff line came with the NCAA back in 2022 when they decided whatever arbitrarily from this point forward, everybody gets, 5 years and that's it. Those players in essence sued the NCAA because of the COVID year. The poster child for it, as we've talked about, is AJ Storr, who even this week had signed with UNLV. So 5th school, 5th year. But right now, the 10th Court of Appeals said, hold on, there was a ruling that was made by the NCAA that needs to be followed, and a federal court supersedes a state court. So as of right now, all of those athletes that thought they were getting that 5th year of eligibility, oh, nay, you're going to have to go out and find yourself a job.
So take me through this process then, counsel, if you can. So the federal court supersedes the state court, which means that if this is going to be challenged, which it will, it's got to be now challenged by another federal court, another level higher, like in a federal appeals is my assumption. Okay. So you go to that level, they need to find a bench, right, that is going to be, that they believe, that the attorneys believe are going to be more sympathetic to the athletes and their plea than the previous court was on that said, no, that you've got to stick with the NCAA. Am I understanding that right? Does that seem...
I think it sounds perfectly logical, but nothing is logical when we're talking about the way college athletics is gone. I mean, this is the type of case that could end up sitting at the feet of the Supreme Court, because the understanding that I got, and again, Charlie would be, I think, thrilled with this because he's always kind of knocking at the NCAA for not standing up for themselves and taking things to the next level, that the NCAA now, with a ruling like this and some of the things that have happened within the last 6 months that have gone in their favor, I think are a bit re-energized in wanting to kind of stand up and fight for themselves. And I noticed that what the NCAA did was take it to a federal court again, much like what we saw in the Texas Tech fiasco that we spent so much time talking about, that the federal court seems to be a little bit, I'll say, sympathetic with the fact that the NCAA has established rules. They're abiding by those rules, and you need to follow it. As
you remember that agreed to those rules.
Right, as opposed to that geographic nature that the state courts provide, in which I've got a judge who's going to be elected or looking to be reelected, that's going to appease the fan base because that's going to mean votes when election time rolls around. At the federal level, you're appointed, and you're looking at it more, in my opinion, from a law perspective as opposed to the law and a geographical perspective.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, you're dealing with a particular court on the state side, and we've seen example after example of this, of just being sympathetic to what is happening to, I guess in this case it would be the plaintiff. I don't know, but when I look at this, I think the challenge now that these athletes are going to have is adjusting and finding precedent within the federal court that they can use as an argument against the finding of the previous federal court, right? That's the challenge.
And the funny thing is, sarcastically, is the 10th Court of Appeals has had rulings in favor of athletes.
Okay.
So there's balance there. So if we're looking at the scales of justice, you've got some balance that has taken place. They haven't gone one way or the other consistently. What you get, at least outwardly looking in, because I don't have the ability to read these cases like some people do. We should have got Mac. We should put Mac on the phone and let him analyze this thing. But the idea that they've ruled now in favor of the NCAA, they've had some cases that have gone in favor of athletes. I think it's hard then to go to the next level and argue bias. I guess is where I'm going with that this 10th Court of Appeals has shown a propensity to really rule on what the subject matter is that sits before them.
Well, and then now you've got arguably 15 players and 15 universities just in limbo, right? What do we do? You've already, in the case of AJ Storr and UNLV, the offer has been made. The offer has been accepted. You anticipated that he was going to be able to play. And now all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. I'm not feeling sorry for them. That's not where I'm going. But I mean, now this is for them. They're going to argue that this has got to get resolved. It's got to be resolved quickly. And I don't disagree with that. Because there's always another level of resolution. And you brought up the Supreme Court earlier. Well, let's just say for the sake of argument, it gets that far. Supreme Court gets to select its cases.
Right.
They
it
don't
doesn't. Right.
They don't have to look at a case. So if they choose not to see this, which I could certainly see them doing, then it just goes back to that next level, that next higher court that says, okay, that's the finding that they had, the judgment that they had is what sticks.
So one thing to keep an eye on with what you just said is those who have been offered a contract, knowing how things have gone with regards to the players, like, are they keeping it? Because we've seen players who have gotten contracts from a school, collected some cash, and then entered the transfer portal and kind of double dipped, for lack of a better way of saying it. So that could be another storyline as this thing moves forward, something to keep an eye on. Another court ruling that took place this week can only happen in Louisiana. And the court in Louisiana ruled, Aaron, that a particular NFL player who was cut by, I believe it was the Philadelphia Eagles, can now be eligible within the state of Louisiana as long as they have eligibility to play football. So we could theoretically see an individual cut by the Philadelphia Eagles find his way on to the LSU Tiger team.
Yeah, I don't understand how this can even be questionably allowed or considered. Like, I mean, forever it has always been, you have given up your ability to play college sports. Maybe this is just way too simple and too dumb, but where do these people think that they can just all of a sudden make these new rules because they want to or they think they can?
I think the problem, Daniel, is that we've had precedent, right, in other sports, basketball, baseball, whatever the case may be, where guys have tested the waters, come back, still had another year of eligibility. And the fact that here's a guy who gets cut, right? I get cut. Well, that thought of making $1 million to play professional football has just rolled out the window. But if I can go back college, the way NIL deals are now, I can go ahead and make that $1 million and then maybe upgrade my stock for next year. But at least for one more year, I'm getting a 7-figure check, which is something I think somebody of this caliber might find themselves getting, especially with LSU.
Well, with LSU, yeah. And I think the argument that's made then is that you are limiting their ability to make an income. I think if you're telling me that I have a year of eligibility left, this is all a result of NIL. We all know
right,
that.
But they don't have eligibility left. Right?
But
they conceded that.
They conceded it, but now with all of the gray area of eligibility.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying here.
Yeah,
I hear what you're saying, but it used to be cut and dry. Now it's gray. And
The-
so they're gonna use that gray to see if they can get their way back into another contract. Is kind of what it is.
And the gray area stems from when we have universities now that are going overseas and recruiting
There's all kinds
players,
of gray.
right?
Yeah.
Who were technically pro. I mean, how many are of those college athletes that we're finding at various universities across the country that came from Serbia, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, and go right down the line that were playing professional basketball already at the age of 16, 17, 18, like they do. And the fact that they were professional athletes and allowed to then play at Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, whatever the
UW Green
case
Bay.
may be,
Yeah.
right? Now these athletes are going, well, wait a minute. They had a contract and you allowed them to play. That's the gray area, Dan, that you were just speaking to that I think a lot of them are capitalizing on. So a couple of court cases to keep an eye on. We talked about football players potentially making their trek into this NIL atmosphere last week, and it's coming to fruition. We got to take a break here as we make our way to the top of hour number 1. When we come back, we're going to get to some headlines. It's College Sports Weekly. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, and we're powered by the Potawatomi
radio. It's the headlines. Tell me, have you heard it? Headlines. Read all about it, baby. Headlines. Headlines.
All right, welcome back in College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Shout out to Ron, who's checking us out on our social media on the western part of the state. Dave over in Delafield, appreciate you checking in. And then here on the board, Mountain West giving us a good morning and saying Aaron needs his own show. Completely agree. Completely agree for the young man sitting behind the board who's guiding the ship for us today, because
Doing my best.
you're doing great, because
Thank you.
heaven knows we wouldn't know what buttons to push if you put us back there. So we appreciate you, Aaron. A couple of things to get to. Let's do some D3 top 25s here, or preseason, I should say, top 25s. We start with football. Platteville getting the nod this year in the WIAC, followed by La Crosse, River Falls, and Whitewater. The one there that really intrigues me, Dan, is the fact that they have River Falls at number 3. Now, again, this is usually the coaches and SIDs and so forth within the conference that are voting. Considering the loss at quarterback that River Falls has to now replace in Blaha, he was unbelievably talented in helping them win the national championship last year. I just thought it was interesting to see them above Whitewater, who's a perennial powerhouse when we talk about WIAC football.
Yeah, that might be a respect issue right there. Like,
Sure.
you know, you are the defending national champion. We're going to put you up there, and we don't know, like you said, we don't know what we don't know right now. And how does River Falls respond to losing someone of that caliber? Right.
Absolutely.
That's going to be the trick there. And with Whitewater at number 4, which I don't think is a bad placement for them. I just love that Whitewater is just kind of just out there, just circling. They're the Sharks circling, and they're looking at that number 1 spot.
Well, and the crazy part is, as we always talk about, and Aaron, you know, being someone who's from the La Crosse area, understand this with regards to WIAC sports, you can never necessarily hang your hat on a team and think they're going to run away with it, because the competition is so good within the WIAC among some of the other D3 conferences that we have here in the state of Wisconsin, that they suddenly start beating up on each other. And lo and behold, as Dan was just talking about, Whitewater's kind of lurking there, and they get themselves on a roll. And before you know it, you see the Warhawks sitting at number 1, and who they thought, that being in the preseason poll, would supersede them, have fallen maybe by the wayside.
Yeah, you're not getting through the WIAC unscathed. I mean, you look at the WIAC schedule each and every year. When I was in La Crosse for the past 5 years, we covered the WIAC, pretty extensively. You just are like, you have to face those 4 teams in a row.
Right.
Oh wait, you have to face those 7 teams in a row, even with Stevens Point and Eau Claire even being, they're still tougher teams, even though most of these top of the conference teams are beating them. They're still tougher than most opponents that you're going to face from other conferences. It's just a brutal schedule, and it's almost impossible to just win all those games in a row just because it's week after week after week.
And even if we're looking at a 7-game stretch, take 4 of those weeks, and in any given point, those are top 25 games.
Yep.
When you look at the Division III poll, that you can go out and watch a top 25 matchup really right in your own backyard. Another thing to cover real quick is the fact that the Marquette women's basketball team put out their non-conference schedule going into this upcoming season. A couple of dates to keep in mind. On the 17th of November, they'll be at Wisconsin playing at the Kohl Center. And then on the 23rd, they'll be at the Klatsche Center taking on UWM. So a couple of in-state games that I think are worth checking out, dependent upon where you are within the state as we start getting ready for basketball, which makes it hard to believe. Now, Aaron's given me the sign that we got 1 minute left. So we're going to push this into, as we talk about the AP top 25 in the next hour. And that's the fact that news came through this week that the Badgers, as far as ticket sales go for the upcoming season, has dropped. So we'll take some time in the next hour to discuss that. Also, we'll talk with our friends at Bryan and Stratton, and in this case, talk a little NIU baseball. We'll do it all after the break. This is Wisconsin Sports Radio Network's presentation of College Sports Weekly, live from the Potawatomi Sportsbook Studio.
basketball, football, baseball. From Division 1 to Division 3, it's time for College Sports Weekly with Don Macholis and Dan Underberg on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
All right, welcome in. Hour number 2 of College Sports Weekly as we are live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Don Wachulis, along with the professor Dan Underberg, Aaron Morris on the ones and twos here for the final 60 minutes of our program. As we make our way through the next 60, we're going to talk about the AP preseason top 25. Also continue or start, I should say, a little bit of a discussion regarding some news that came out this week, again, with regards to the Wisconsin Badgers and the football program, more probably from a hype and monetary side, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Matt Makerzak, the head basketball coach at Northern Illinois University, will be joining us as part of our check-in with Bryan and Stratton College. We'll make the connection when we get a chance to talk with Coach. We'll hand out some shovels, and then we'll make our way to get up out of here as Aaron will be hanging around and getting ready to do the pregame show for our Milwaukee Brewers as they take on the Atlanta Braves. And Aaron, quite confidently earlier during the break, you're predicting a win today, which I was very, very pleased to hear.
They're 9-3 and Logan Henderson starts this year.
There you go.
Make it 10-3.
There you go. That the pitching staff, as much as I think we would or had hoped to get something of a name, at the trade deadline, I think we're starting to see these young pitchers really make a name for themselves and ascend up the ladder, so to speak. And so looking forward to hearing Aaron there on the pregame show. Again, Brewers, Braves, 1:10, I believe, is first pitch at American Family Field, and that'll be this afternoon. And then everybody packs up their stuff to go to the Little League Classic for the game tomorrow, which will be on the Four Letter Network. So a big weekend for Brewer baseball. But let's talk about the Badgers, Dan, and the fact that a report came out this week that we've seen a significant drop in season ticket sales. And it's a prime indicator that I think there are a number of people who aren't drinking the Kool-Aid like I am.
Maybe it's when you look at, number one, it's an investment to do those. It's not only just investment in your finances to get a season tickets, but it's also an investment in time. Do you want to go back and forth? And that might be the bigger of the two issues, which is, do you want to lose a Saturday? You always gain a Saturday when your team wins and they win well. It's just the mindset. But do you want to lose a Saturday, as I think many people may have felt that they have been doing that over the course of the last 2 years, even though, again, near the back half of the season, Wisconsin played better. So this is the indicator, and this might be the true indicator of Luke Fickell being able to stick around or not, which is it's not going to be about season tickets, but now it's going to be about single game tickets as the season wears on. Are you getting more and more people into this stadium? Because candidly, you and I were there last year. We were sitting in the press box, and you could, when you walk in, you're like, where is everybody?
Yeah.
You could just see that, again, we've used the term, there hasn't been any juice. And this is just a more firm picture that, yeah, Wisconsin has slid a little bit in football.
We're going to see the hype again, Aaron, at Lambeau with that first game against Notre Dame. We'll know almost immediately if the hype around this team and the Kool-Aid that I'm drinking transfers over to Madison, because to Dan's point, we can walk down the street heading towards the stadium and the vibe just isn't what it was 10 years ago, and that's what we're hoping to see get flipped.
I don't know if I can fully embrace whatever attitude or hype comes to the Lambeau Field game, because I think it's Lambeau Field, so it's going to have the hype anyway.
Yes.
So I don't know. I think it'll be a great time, no matter if people think the Badgers are going to be good or not.
Absolutely. I would love to see whatever that hype is, though. If the Badgers play well, and we can talk about how we defined well the weekend of the game. But if the Badgers play well, and that exuberance that you're going to find, as Aaron said, Dan, a product of Lambeau Field. I make no mistake. It's the idea of being able to go to Lambeau like we did a few years back when it was Wisconsin and LSU, to go there to see your team against a historic team like Notre Dame in an historic stadium. The buzz is going to be electric. Now play well, play competitive. Oh my gosh, get the upset. And let's see if then we can just pack that up and ship it over to Madison to get the season up and rolling.
Absolutely. And if there was an upset, and I don't think it's impossible, because we've seen Notre Dame underperform early in seasons regularly, right? This is not, it would not be a new thing for Notre Dame, and it would not be a new thing, to have Wisconsin come in, obvious underdog, playing that role, feeling energized by being at Lambeau Field, and then staying close and winning at the end.
Right.
That's plausible. Right. So, yeah, if they're able to do that and then bring that into the next two games at home and walk out of that 3-0, having performed well in those two games, then, yeah, I think there's going to be a substantial higher demand for those for the single tickets.
Sure.
Going into the Big Ten.
It's a telltale sign, right? Because people are speaking with their wallets, and you know how good your program is or isn't doing based on the butts that are in the seats. And being that football is your biggest revenue generator, the pressure is mounting on Luke Fickell, his staff, the entire athletic department to get this thing right, because it spills over then into the other sports, both financially and from a fandom perspective. Like the volleyball team, which is playing down at Fiserv this weekend in the midst of that unbelievable setup that we've got here in the city of Milwaukee as far as college volleyball goes on the women's side. Great. The volleyball team has been magnificent. But if your football team is performing at an optimal level, it bleeds then over into basketball, volleyball, golf. It doesn't
Track
matter.
Field.
Right. You just get hyped up because of the fact that this is our school, this is our state school, and we want to see everybody then do well, just like the football team is doing.
And there is a want, I think, within the state for college football to be really, really good. It saw an extended version of love towards the University of Wisconsin after 1993 and 1994. That magical season when Alvarez got them into the Rose Bowl and they won. And it just, from there, they just skyrocketed in terms of just being part of what it meant to be, football in Wisconsin as a state. Right. And it carried over, I think, longer than anybody could have imagined. We went through coaching changes and some ups and more ups than downs. But it's now we're in this 2-year, 3-year leg where we're hoping it can come back again. They'll come back if they believe. And I think that's the issue, that there's an issue of trust. And that's why that money isn't going in there. The same way with giving money into NIL, and again, Wisconsin has improved. I get it. But if Wisconsin were to walk out of the season 8-4, the money's going to show up. It'll be there.
I'll say this. We'll give the athletic department another idea. Here's another T-shirt. You put Badger football on the front, and on the back you put Time to Believe.
Ooh.
Time to Believe.
There you go.
There it is. There's the first T-shirt giveaway to the fan base when they're playing whatever directional school weeks 2 and 3. And the only thing Dan and I will take is maybe a
percentage,
a free beverage.
Yeah.
Some
Come on, man.
I set the bar low, bud. I set the bar low. All right. Let's go into the AP Top 25, the preseason Top 25. And I think what's fun about the AP Top 25 is if you compare what they project to be the best 25 teams in college football to what happens at the end of the season. Let's go back last year. Penn State was a top 5 team. Penn State couldn't get their coach through the season as they fell off the deep end. Ole Miss makes it to the playoffs, but their coach left towards the end of the year because he feels as if he's got a better chance at LSU. Speaking of LSU, a top 10 preseason, top 25 stature there for the Tigers, and they sharded themselves as well during the season. And again, you look at this list and you start to think about what teams on the list that are being projected, in this case, too high. And the hard part for me about what is the AP top 25 now is the transfer portal. Used to be able to look at in Ohio State and Oregon and Georgia, whatever the case may be. You knew what their recruiting classes were. You knew how many juniors and seniors they had. You knew how they were developed in that program. I mean, you think of Georgia and Alabama, the powerhouses in the SEC. You knew how those players were going to just keep building year after year after year before they jump ship to go to the NFL. Now with the transfer portal, you hear people justify their place in the preseason top 25, and yet 40 to 45% of the roster is completely different. And you have no idea, those that you're bringing in, you may think are 4 and 5 star athletes, but you don't know what it's doing to the culture of your program as well. One of the things you and I have talked about, especially with basketball, is how good Greg Gard has done over the years in bringing in people out of the transfer portal, but meshing to what they want to do as far as Badger basketball goes. It's much more difficult in football because obviously you've got many more individuals playing that sport and being on the roster than you do basketball, but it's something to consider. So Ohio State sits at 1, Oregon 2, Georgia 3, Notre Dame 4, and Texas at 5. And I'm not going to go ahead and read our way down the list, but Dan, I'll start with you, and then Aaron, throw it your way. What team in the top 25 do you look at and go, I'm not so sure? Because your guess with regards to it is as good as anybody's, especially, again, when you compare last year's top 25 to where it ended up at the end of the season. You can justify a team's rise or fall any direction that you want.
Yeah, I think you could look at 75% of these teams and just kind of wonder just a little bit. The one that stood out to me was number 10, which was Oklahoma. Because Oklahoma, I'm not denying that they're a good football team, but Oklahoma has been that team that has been on the roller coaster of ups and downs throughout seasons. Within a season itself, they've gone back and forth, and they haven't had that consistency that maybe you're used to a little bit. I'll look a little bit at Miami. They've got one vote at number 1. But they lost their starting quarterback, and granted, he was all over the place at times, but he was a big reason that they got to the championship game. Didn't go to class, but we go through that, and then I look down, I'll go a little bit further down to number 17, which is Washington. Okay, now you got to prove it to me. If you're a Husky, you've got to prove to me that you're worthy of being in the top 20. I'm not entirely bought in that Washington should be there.
I was thinking about Washington as mine. I don't get it. But I'll go with a different Big Ten team, USC. I don't know if I totally buy USC. They've been a middle of the pack team for many years now. I think number 14 is Lincoln Riley. USC.
Yeah, you're right.
Absolutely. Yes.
They're a 20s team at best, I think, for a preseason. If I was going to go outside the Big Ten, I'm going to go probably with Texas A&M. They're number 8 in the country. Their schedule was weak last year. That's why they made the college football playoff, and I think they're banking a little bit on that from last year.
I think the one for me that sits low is Indiana. I think the lack of respect for what Curt Cignetti has done with the Hoosiers. Now, granted, I get it. Their quarterback is now the quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders. Mendoza was a huge part of the success that they had, but I think you're underselling putting Indiana at 6 with the way Cignetti has been able to build a roster, utilizing the transfer portal, meshing them all together, and then coaching them up. That to me was a bit disrespectful. I'll say it that way.
Where would you put them?
Where would I put them? I think I might put them up somewhere in that top 3. I don't necessarily believe they would be the number 1 team in the preseason poll, but I would put them ahead of Georgia. I'd put them ahead of Notre Dame. Sorry, Paul, but I'd put them again. I'd put them up past them just based on what they've done over the last 2 years.
Top 3 teams would be Big Ten teams then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's one of the powerhouse conferences. One team on there that I think is ranked too high for me is Michigan, simply because of the fact that you had a Bryce Underwood last year as a freshman kind of thrown to the fire. And that's a byproduct of what? NIL, right? Guys who write checks want to see the person they're writing the check about playing the game. And I don't think Bryce Underwood, especially with the tornado that was Michigan athletics last year, should have been on the field. I think it should have been somebody else where he kind of developed, learned the system, whatever the case may be. Now he's got a new coach, new system. I want to see what his confidence level is like. If Bryce Underwood has not been shaken from a confidence level, then I could argue Michigan could be higher than what they stand right now in the preseason top 25. But to me, it all revolves around Bryce Underwood, not his athleticism, but where's his confidence at?
And my take on Michigan is I think they could surprise some people this year. I think they could be better because if you look at what they've had to deal with, to your point, the tornado, I think it's very difficult to play football. I think it's very difficult to play to be the team that you want to be. I think the new coaching staff has come in is a little bit of a cleansing for the program. Now, I won't claim to know how good they're going to be. I mean, the Whittingham is obviously a fantastic coach, but the idea to start fresh and to be able to jump into Big Ten season might surprise people a little bit. And I take no pleasure in saying Michigan might be better than they are, because after I went off on them last week. But looking at this again, we heard all about, over the course of the SEC coaches conferences and the Big Ten coaches conferences and the dialogue that was going in there, you see a lot of love for the SEC in this top 25.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying that they're bad, but it's at the same time, another team that I would look at and say, okay, where should they be is Tennessee. Okay, Tennessee goes all over the place. They're at 20 right now. Is that too low? Is that just right? It's just weird. So it's great that we have Ohio State and Oregon in the top 2, right? But after that, it's just all over in this top 25.
Tennessee's on the bottom half of the top 25 right now, because I don't think they've figured out what their quarterback situation is, that they're still trying to figure that. Talk about NIL checks and people promising and, all of that mess. I think they're still trying to figure that one out. The one team on here that I think in essence is ranked too low, and that's Penn State, because what I've seen historically now when coaches have left and they're able to bring their players with them. There were a number of guys who left Iowa State to go with Coach Campbell over to Penn State. They've established what Coach wants from a culture perspective. They understand things schematically. It makes the transition that much more easy when you have the ability to do that. I think Penn State rebounds after what took place last year under a new system, a new coach, but that coach's ability to bring players through the transfer portal to make that transition a little more seamless. I'd be weary when you play Penn State this year.
Interesting you went there, because I was going to ask you guys what you thought about Penn State going into this year, because I'm not so sure. Number 18 seems a little too high for me.
Mm-hmm.
It seems a little too low for you. I don't know. I don't like the idea of, well, you were a 5-win team last year and maybe they played worse than that at that time, and you're going to bring all of these guys over. I'm on the opposite side of that, where I'm not entirely sure that's a good thing.
Yeah, for me, Penn State is, I think, right where I would put. I think it's fairly accurate within a couple points here or there, top or bottom. I don't know that I wouldn't put them any higher than 18. How about that? I wouldn't do that.
And that's the beauty of this, right? Because we haven't played a down yet and we're guessing. And so it used to be, again, AP top 25. It had a little more validity because you had players that were with the program for 2, 3, sometimes 4, if not 5 years. You could make a pretty good estimate of how things would transition from the previous year. Now, with the transfer portal, just take our Badgers. Look how different the team is this year compared to last. I think it's guesswork now by the AP. Allegedly maybe an AI tool utilized in making this thing. It just, to me, doesn't have the validity that it once did, but at least it gives us something to argue
Are
about.
they gettable? Penn State by,
Yes.
by Wisconsin week 4. Are they gettable?
Well, I'll
I
say,
feel better if it was at home at Wisconsin.
and I'll feel better at that point if, again, you take care of the directional schools.
Yeah.
So in weeks 2 and 3, which I have been touting as my benchmarks for the season, if they can roll over those directional schools that they've struggled with over the last couple of years, I give them an outside chance, barring whatever happens in game 1 with Notre Dame. I'd give them an outside chance because Penn State's a difficult place to go to in order to try and win a football game.
What do you think?
I think they are gettable. I don't think they will win because it's in Happy Valley, and
Right.
but I think the Badgers could play quite well against Penn State. I'm not completely buying them at this point, and it will definitely be they play 3 cupcakes going into that Badger game. Penn State does, so it'll be the toughest team that Penn State will see to that point. Like they
Right.
won't necessarily be challenged up to that point. Not saying the Badgers are, that big challenging team either, but the Badger I think can give them a little bit of a challenge.
Well, and that's the interesting point too, right? Do you play what I'll call a tough opponent like the Badgers are in week 1, and then have your 2 directional schools to get you ready for Big Ten play? Or do you play those directional schools, as we love to call them, and get some sort of momentum going, especially under a new coach, to propel yourself into the Big Ten season? I think it's an argument that has validity on both sides. It's interesting to see how different programs go ahead and attack it. All right, we got to get to a break. When we come back after the break, we're going to talk some basketball here in mid-August, as we'll bring in Matt Makerzak, the head coach over at Northern Illinois University. There's a tie there with Bryan and Stratton, as we always check in each and every week with our friends at Bryan and Stratton. We'll talk to Coach on the other side of this timeout. Once again, it's College Sports Weekly, and we're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network.
can slow it down so you can pump it. Then I move it fast so you can pump it. Two balls in a bat, my bitch always ahead. Sliding into home base, trying to hit a home run. Swing, bada, 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 swing. Baby,
Welcome back in College Sports Weekly. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered as always by the Potawatomi Sports Book. Matt Makerzak slated to join us here shortly as we effort to get Coach on, the new head basketball coach at Northern Illinois University, who has ties with Bryan and Stratton. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, that's a significant jump, Dan, when you're thinking about what takes place at a junior college level to move to the Division I level there at Northern Illinois. But the one crazy part of it is when you think about, junior college athletes, it's a 2-year commitment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be, a 2-year commitment, then move on to see if you could play maybe at a 4-year school. But now at the 4-year school, you're barely getting 2-year commitments from your Division I athlete.
Right.
So I gotta believe understanding how to quickly develop and build culture and all of those elements that become part of a team is something that Matt has in his back pocket after being a part of life at Bryan and Stratton.
I would imagine. And looking at his kind of career track, just looking at his head coaching stuff, I mean, how quickly things can change when you're in the middle of a season, middle of a year.
Absolutely.
It may feel like forever, but in the course of 8 years, he went from Bryan and Stratton now to NIU,
Right.
Doing that D1 program and a program that many of us being in the Midwest are familiar with.
Absolutely.
We know that. So what is that like to kind of push and find your way and earn your way up into that, that mid-major program where now you can legitimately make an effort to get into the NCAA tournament and do all those things.
And it's interesting that NIU, from a football perspective, is making the jump into
Mhm.
the FBS.
Mhm.
The other sports are not. So will that have an impact? Because I guess what you would hope is that maybe Northern Illinois does a little bit of damage now in the FBS. And again, as we talked about with Wisconsin and drawing butts to the seats to increase revenue, maybe the media revenue is up just a smidge, whatever the case may be, to help out all of the other sports that aren't necessarily making that jump to an FBS like situation.
Right. Yeah. Northern Illinois has always been kind of at this juncture, in terms of the teams that they play and where they fit, within the grand scheme of college football. Because every now and again they jump up, they make noise.
Mhm.
You hear about them beating a Notre Dame. They do these different things, and it feels like that's a program athletically that is always just sitting right on the edge of jumping in and making a higher step
Yeah.
up. And this FBS is one of them.
Well, and then you think about, especially in basketball's got a way of evening the playing field,
Mhm.
I think, a little bit more
Yeah.
than what we see on the gridiron, so to
Agreed.
speak. And so you get those upsets, which makes college basketball so much fun. And the fact that with the number of games college basketball teams have to play, you can withstand an upset here and there, especially at the beginning of the year. We've been talking about Notre Dame, right? Let's just say Northern Illinois is playing Notre Dame and they get the upset. Well, it's a huge marquee win for them. And for Notre Dame, it's a learning opportunity. We'll be able to move
Mhm.
forward and do what we need to do within the ACC. But those types of wins really help propel those mid-majors in situations like I was describing there.
Yeah. And so you're curious, moving back to Matt a little bit, it's just what's the plan? How do you build up? How do you get to the point where you are, you have the opportunity for those upsets and you're really making a name for yourself in those particular instances and getting some traction for your program, for the Huskies? Again, not an unknown brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially for us here in the state of Wisconsin. Coach is now with us. So let's jump over to the Nicolay Law Talk and Text line and bring in the new head coach at Northern Illinois. It's Matt Makerzak. Coach, thanks for jumping in on a Saturday and joining us.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks guys for having me. Super fun to kind of get back to the roots of where I started.
So talk about that journey going from the likes of a Bryan and Stratton and now getting yourself the position that you currently have found yourself in, that being the head coach at Northern Illinois University?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was like I never wanted to leave. You know, it was one of those things where I was from Wisconsin. I wanted to be a head coach, and Brian Stratton gave me that chance to do it, and I loved it so much. It was like, you know what, this is good. I could be here forever and stay in Milwaukee and coach basketball, and I love the people. And it feels like what I've learned in coaching and in probably a lot of things in life is as soon as you're happy, that's when all of a sudden you have these opportunities to move on and get, you know, maybe a higher level or bigger opportunities. And I don't know why it works that way, but it just seems to. And absolutely love my time there. And I obviously wouldn't have happened none of the rest of it without that as a starting point.
Matt, what have you taken that you can recall from your first coaching gig with Bryant and Stratton that maybe you still maintain today, that you still retain, regardless if you're at Northern Michigan or now at NIU? This is some of those lessons that you learned from your first gig as a head coach.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was we come into a situation where it was really new still, year 3 of having sports. And just because it was my first job, I didn't really know what I was doing. And I still feel that way in a lot of ways. So because of that, it was like, let's just surround myself with as many good people as possible, whether that's assistant coaches or players. And then also I wanted to lean in early on to what I knew, which was recruiting Wisconsin. And so between those two things, it worked right away. And then it was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing this. I just want to keep being around people I like and keep sticking to, you know, what I know, which is recruiting Wisconsin. And as that happened, it seemed like that formula worked, and I just stuck with it. But all of that was just the plan of year 1 at Bryant and Stratton, and it hasn't changed in some ways.
So, Coach, has that been then the foundation when you go to Northern Michigan and now at Northern Illinois, is keeping those connections here in the state and now recruiting, you know, young men at a higher level to play Division I basketball? Have you utilized then those connections that you were using at Bryant and Stratton now to help you out to have a jump off point as far as recruiting goes there for the Huskies?
Absolutely. I mean, it's stayed our base, and you know, our team this year is going to have a heavy Wisconsin flavor, about half our roster, and then it's definitely where, you know, kind of our base is recruiting, and we keep recruiting it. And the best example of it would be the best player in the history of Northern Michigan ever was Dylan Keel, and he's from Hustisford, and his brother Justin Keel committed to me at Bryant and Stratton and was going to play for me going into my second year. And then when I took the Northern Michigan job, Justin, you know, his goal was to go D2. That's why he committed to us at Bryant and Stratton. So he came with me to Northern Michigan, and then his brother followed. And so none of that happens without, you know, Justin first committing to us at Bryant and Stratton. And the family was super loyal. Dylan stayed in the crazy portal era where he was offered all the money in the world. He stayed at Northern Michigan, and that loyalty came back to me recruiting Justin and me watching Dylan as a 14-year-old freshman.
So let's talk about what you just alluded to a little bit with the crazy NIL era, and I'm going to couch this a little bit differently. How things can change in 8 years, right? You were the head coach over at Bryant and Stratton, and now 8 years later, here you are at NIU, and within that time, college basketball, college sports in general has just, I'll use the term flipped upside down a little bit. It's just completely different than what, you know, Don and I are used to. And maybe when you were coming through you're up the ranks, you're used to as well. What has that been like for you to just get used to this idea of the transfer portal, the fluidity of having players 1 year and then not the next, finding ways to pay guys? What's that been like?
Yeah, it's almost surreal. Like, you know, on the outside, everything you see on the outside is true for the most part. Like, it's one of those, you know, sometimes things are exaggerated. Like, what you think it is kind of what it is, in a lot of ways. And like, for instance, in the Horizon League last year, 0 of the all-conference players in the entire league stayed. Every single all-conference player left. So it's a wild thing that we're in. The other part for me that's kind of crazy is like you go from early on as a D2 coach, and you're if you can get a kid to pay for their school, you feel like you're really giving them a good deal. And you go in, you offer them a scholarship, and I think that's one of the best things about Bryan Stratton is you can pay for school and there's scholarship money available. Now at Division I, we don't even talk about that. They're like, so how much money do I get? Like, what is the number? And the key we've found is there are a ton of people, parents, kids that are the old school people, loyal, don't care about the money, want a great experience. Now they might need the money number to be fair. I think we all want, to be treated fairly. But at the end of the day, like their priorities are getting an education, having a great college experience, winning, being around great people. And then, the money needs to be, again, competitive within what their market is. If we have a kid that's player of the year and he gets offered $1 million, which is real, what am I supposed to say? It's like, yeah, okay, I get it. Go on. What I think the key is you still want the people that if you average 4 points a game as a freshman, you're not looking for greener pastures or you're not trying to bounce. You want to stay and get better and stay committed. And I think those kids still exist. And to be honest, I think Wisconsin has more of those kids than potentially other states do. And even the Midwest in general, I think some of that loyalty is still there.
Matt Makerzak, the head coach at Northern Illinois University, is joining us on the Nicolay Law Talk and text line. Coach, with the volatility in today's world, are you able to maybe build a team, a culture, whether any of the variations that can fall under that a little bit quicker because of the fact that at Bryan and Stratton, at most you would have those kids for 2 years before they were either done or move on to the Division I level. And again, now with the way the transfer portal is, you've got to very quickly kind of establish things both on and off the court. Being at Bryan and Stratton assist that in any way?
For sure. I actually was just last night telling our staff, I'm like, they were asking me, because this is obviously year one here, like, what does it feel like compared to other years? And I said the year it really reminds me of is the Bryan Stratton year, because we have a whole new team. We have 0 returning players here. We had a couple returners my first year there, but for the most part, it was a brand new team. And in a lot of ways, we've all became junior college coaches to a degree. So I think that culture building and like every team I was a part of, even when we retained guys, has its own identity. Like you have a different best player. Usually you have a different kind of vibe and feeling throughout the team in college sports, even before the portal stuff. Now, I think more than ever, I mean, it really is like, how do we define the culture of the 26-27 version of our team? And full well knowing the 27-28 version might have a whole new feel and culture. And hopefully you have a few of those things that stay consistent, being great teammates, working hard, all the kind of obvious old school stuff that doesn't change, but there definitely are changes within, a program year to year, a lot more. And I think that's, been the case in junior college for a longer time. And now that's just kind of trickled into the NCAA Division II and Division I levels.
Your answer kind of touched on a question that I have for you, which was, really your goals, and you said kind of defining the culture. But when you have this new team, I'll kind of pivot my question a little bit. Is how do you set your goals as you move forward, looking into the season and maybe program wide? What do you want NIU to become during your tenure?
Yeah, I think to me it's being a place that people come and have great experiences. I think that has to be like, we're still college athletics and that's still the goal. And honestly, my whole career, I think that's always been the goal, is have kids come in, have great experiences, really enjoy their time, really develop as much as they can, and then set them up for the future. And, at Bryan Stratton, that future was go on and play, college basketball at the 4-year level. Here, I'd love it if they're here for 5 years and then go play pro or become, doctors or lawyers or whatever it might be. But sometimes that's going to be go on and play high major basketball. But I think that's kind of at the core of it. It's have a great experience, win a lot of games, really, really develop. And if you can do those things, I think everything else falls into place. The other kind of fun part about it is as soon as you get in the gym, it's also about like, are we going to be tough and rebound? Are we going to move the ball well? Are we going to not turn it over? Like, and all of those kind of lessons within that hopefully lead to those big picture goals. Because I think that's the beauty of basketball in particular is it's such a beautiful mix of being this team unselfish sport and this violent collision sport. It kind of has both qualities to it, which is kind of what made me fall in love with it. And I think a lot of people.
Coach, we're up against a break. Thank you so much for jumping on and joining us and looking at the roster with the Wisconsin ties that exist. We're definitely, as the season gets up and running, going to reach back out and continue this conversation. It was great talking to you, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thank you. Really appreciate you guys having me on.
That's Matt Makerzak, the head coach at Northern Illinois University, the new head men's basketball coach. Dan, Wauwatosa West, Arrowhead, Brooks Central, Homestead, Neenah, all familiar high schools here in the state of Wisconsin and all members of this Northern Illinois team. I think it's going to be a team for us as fans, fun to watch because of the connections. And I look forward to seeing how coach is doing once the season gets up and running.
Yeah, it's funny too, is that when you know, for years and years, when you think of basketball hotbeds, and then over the course of the history of this show, recognizing that's far more distributed than people realize,
right? And
that Wisconsin does have a claim to excellent talent. I mean, we've seen that in the NBA right now, but there are sources and pipelines of talent that a team like NIU can tap, like a team like Wisconsin can tap, and Marquette can tap, and they're all here. So we've got some great talent here.
Absolutely. All right, last break. Aaron, you ready? Because when we come back, you got a shovel to hand out, my friend. We get Aaron back indoctrinated. Not the maiden voyage. He's done it once before, so he should be, just an old wily vet when we hand out shovels, and we'll do that when we come back. It's College Sports Weekly. We're live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sports.
shovel the funk. I feel like shovel the funk. I got to shovel the funk. You want to shovel the funk? Do you want to shovel the funk? Then go ahead. Go.
All right, one last time, College Sports Weekly, live from the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Let's hand out some shovels. We got to do it quickly. Professor, I start with you.
ABCA volleyball first serve. They had a great first turnout last night. We saw Wisconsin versus Kentucky. It didn't work out the way Wisconsin wanted it to, but just hang tight, Badger fans. They are a young team. They're a talented team. They'll do well.
Good stuff happening down at Fiserv. Oh, Aaron.
I'll go Marcus Freeman because he said it's too late to add any new players. So I'm just going to give him a shovel because finally somebody's like, all right, that's enough. We don't need to just try to jam through the door to add more
You
talent.
can't wait for like guys to get cut off of the Packers and the Bears and then see if they have a year of eligibility left. And piggybacking off that, my shovel goes to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals.
This has got to be the first time.
Woo! I'll
Giving
giving it to a court for ruling the way they did in upholding the NCAA. And Dan and I over the years have taken our fair shots at the NCAA, but I think they deserve this one in trying to put some boundaries around the world of college athletics, and a federal court went ahead and upheld that. Again, we're 15 days away from the start of the Badger football season, so start getting ready, and we're only 7 days away from the Money Train. The Money Train will join us next week to make his picks as we get to week 0. Our thanks. Holy cow. To Matt Makerzak, the head coach at Northern Illinois University, wishing him nothing but luck as the basketball season gets up and running, especially with all of the Wisconsin ties on that Husky team. So for Aaron Morris, for the Professor Dan Underberg, I'm Don Wachillis. Have yourself a great week. We're back in 6 and 22.